The Alley of the Sphinxes plops the player down at the path leading to Thebes. It's jarring if you don't read the Natriska message. It explains that Sam walked across the desert from Memphis to Thebes and had to drop all of his ammo except for his shotgun shells to make it easier. You also keep any leftover cannonballs from the previous level, most likely from Sam being used to carrying balls of steel. This isn't the only jarring thing though, as Natriska believes that the Memphis leaders did not know what to do with the sign of Amun-Ra. This really just spits and stomps on the plot. I guess the Memphis raiders stole the sign of Amun-Ra just because, and Sam also retrieved it just because, all without knowing what it is even good for or why it should be heavily guarded. It's a real low point as the details about the story are being disregarded. Serious Sam has a good setup for a well-written story interwoven with ancient history, but it just does not capitalize on it and goes as far as crippling itself by throwing away any and all meaning and detail. Egypt is also losing its luster as the level design leans heavily on the gameplay with a very dense and large amount of enemies to hold it up, rather than in conjunction with its visuals, in which the arsenal was stripped away except for the starter weapons, shotguns, and cannon if you have any leftover ammo, forcing the player to cool down and reset to a slower pace of fighting. You could argue that the level design started to degrade before now, but here is where it is most blatant. Flat in every meaning of the word.
I experimented with different kinds of environments, and the first thing that came to my mind that looked good is just to make one big flat floor and put some pyramids on it. That was basically level.
I have a particular issue with Alley of the Sphinxes and Karnak. They feel basic and uninspired, like they're built purely for gameplay purposes and not much else. For example, a big open-air complex of temples composes the real-life Karnak. That's perfect for Serious Sam, yet it was reduced to a bunch of connected, straightforward corridors. Alley of the Sphinxes is just one straight path. I don't like using reductive statements like this, but in this situation it is so blatant that I feel comfortable doing so. Metropolis is one long corridor, yet its urban-like density helps obscure it. The Great Pyramid is another flat and straightforward level, however I can forgive it for its spectacle. Dunes is rather barren even for a desert in the city skyline, and has a lot of walking. But there is breathing room between the large fights, and it is a relatively short level both in terms of size and time to complete. There is not a whole lot to look at or interact with in the Alley of the Sphinxes or Karnak with their long length, unnecessary amount of walking, and density of enemies making it worse. In historical terms, the Alley of the Sphinxes would be the Ram's Road or Avenue of Sphinxes that connects the Karnak and Luxor temple complexes. In-game, it's placed as the pathway to the gates of Thebes. It also lacks any sphinxes or cryo-sphinxes, which are ram-headed sphinxes. We never got answers for our questions back in Memphis like Natriska said we would. I'm not sure why Sam trusts this AI. I'm not a fan of how the game forces the player to lose their arsenal like this, as we're going to get all of the ammo back within this level anyway. It feels like a very artificial way to slow down the pacing with a giant speed bump. It's tedious since now we have to kill major and minor biomechanoids, a couple of wearables, a reptiloid, and an adult arachnoid with just the shotguns and revolvers in a wide open area. And not to forget the clown car spawners of Clear. There is a limited amount of rocket ammo that you can get, and more in a secret to have enough to get by, at least with the double ammo in the serious difficulty. It does help smooth out this section's tedium, but it doesn't get rid of how it's a bit of a slog. This arsenal reset would have been better suited indoors, or at least in a bounded outdoors area similar to Sand Canyon, until the player regains their ammo. Depending on how you play, it can get drawn out even longer due to the clear. There are so many that spawn in that the shotgun cannot keep up, either forcing the player to strafe around if they're skilled enough, or keep running backwards. The latter meaning that the player would then have to walk all the way back to where they were. If the catchphrase, "I hate running backwards," didn't originate here, then I don't know a better place.
Look at the size of that thing!
Eventually, the cannon is available to be picked up if you missed the secret, and officially completes the arsenal without any secrets. The cannon can take out the majority of enemies in one shot and cuts right through small to medium enemies with ease. This is by far the most powerful weapon, as it can still kill enemies without the need to charge it if you happen to need space to breathe right away. It's still best to charge it up since it also gives it a higher velocity, allowing the cannonball to have more of a chance to kill more enemies as it bounces off of walls. The Sirius Engine 1 calculates the damage of the cannonball based on its momentum, so that extra velocity will be needed to take down major biomechanoids in one shot. We can see this with how shooting through enemies to hit a major doesn't kill it in one hit, yet shooting over them will. HD versions and beyond don't have this with the new engine, which streamlines the mechanic at the cost of deciding whether it's best to aim the shot at the enclosing wave or to take out a highly dangerous enemy now. There's still some skillful expressions such as lighting up wearables or picking the best path to fire to maximize its carnage. Unlike power weapons in other games, the cannon doesn't have scarce amounts of ammo with 60 balls on Sirius or 30 on lower difficulties. As long as you're not spamming it all the time, you'll always have some ammo for it on hand to take out a dangerous target quickly or to disperse a wave with only a couple of shots. Ammo for it isn't stingy as the end of the game approaches, so you don't have to be strict with it either. An interesting point in its Nitriska entry is that the cannonballs are filled with uranium, so each explosion is a mini nuclear bomb. It claims that the lead casing will keep the user safe, but obviously it ignores the fallout from those explosions. It does specify that it's the military experts making that claim, so at least it's accurate to real life. Either Sam is immune to radiation poisoning from some advanced future medicine, or he's slowly dying. Given that Sam was inspired by Duke Nukem and the Duke having balls of steel, I'm willing to believe that Sam has balls of lead to protect himself. Unfortunately, we're stuck with the shotguns to deal with the upcoming arena fight as there isn't enough of other ammo to spare. Luckily, it's just clearing kamikazes that trickle in. The wave after that, with all of the wereballs running amok, is when any last shots of rockets or cannonballs will come in handy. While I have the time to talk about it, one thing that Serious Sam does really well is how none of the enemies are bullet sponges, given that you have the appropriate weapon. Everything besides the bosses can be killed rather quickly, which is a necessity with how many enemies Serious Sam can have in just one room. It also keeps the pace fast and frantic as the player's attention will turn to many different enemies as the fight progresses, rather than a select few that will soak up wherever the player fires at them. This does come with the caveat that the weapons have optimal scenarios where they are best used. You wouldn't use the shotguns when you need a fast fire rate, the automatic weapons against a high health enemy such as the lava golem, or the explosives against enemies in close range. Not all of them are about how much damage you can deal with each press of the trigger. They each have their own role to complement each other. Juggling weapons also adds to the frantic feeling and allows skillful play. Knowing what optimal weapon to use throughout a fight keeps the action smooth and engaging to reward the player's skill. This isn't as prominent in the Sirius Engine 1 versions due to the slower weapon swap, yet it is still an option. Having an enemy that is a bullet sponge to all of the player's weapons would ruin this balance that Crow Team has created. We've also seen the tedium it can create, such as having to use the revolvers against arachnoids in both this level and the DLC. We're finally met with the Gates of Thieves and where the four elements show their use. It's a bit hard to see up close, but back in the previous arena, it's easier to see the scale of Thebes, similarly to seeing Memphis in the Dunes level. You can also see the Theban triad painted on the walls, which consists of Amun, his wife Mut, and his son Khonsu. They were the popular gods of Thebes, most likely because they were the Sirians who ruled over the city or the ones who took the most care of it. There are supplies scattered around, such as an ammo pack, allowing for us to use all of our weapons again. Placing down an element will spawn a unique fight. We'll start with the air element. The air element showcases kamikazes in clear. a mix that we fought shortly before in the previous arena. Next up is the Earth element. We're met with both types of biomechanoids, Invisible Gunnar and Clear. It's a good mix of both range and close quarters attackers. Next up is the Fire element. We're met with both types of biomechanoids, Invisible Gunnar and Clear. It's a good mix of both range and close quarters attackers. Next up is the Water element. We're met with both types of biomechanoids, Invisible Gunnar and Clear, as well as 4 werebolls and 5 reptiloids. It feels uninspired for how these waves were made, with an over-reliance on the same mixture of enemies as well as 2 particular types, Clear and biomechanoids. That also goes for most of the late game as well. Serious Sam's pool of enemies may not be that large, but they can still at least make unique combinations of them instead of the smaller pool that they for some reason limit themselves in. For example, we haven't seen any frogs in a long while. There's also a lack of the beheaded variants, besides the kamikazes, that they could have used. Harpies are another option who are really only used in bursts. One option that they could have gone with is theming each element's wave. The beheaded are closely colored for 3 of them: Rocketeers for water, Firecrackers for fire, and Bombers for earth. Harpies can be the one for air. Other enemies can fill the rest of the roster for each wave, and at least this way there's more creativity. Ironically, at the end we're met with a new enemy that will be showcased as a boss here, then used as a regular enemy in the next levels. The lava golem is like the Highlander boss fights, but the projectiles instead predict your movement, and smaller lava golems spawn as the boss gets hurt, and those golems spawn more mini golems. It's not hard. Explosives make short work of this fight. Boss fights aren't Serious Sam's strong suit, but at least this one had a unique Matryoshka doll mechanic, as well as the prediction fireballs, which continues with its regular enemy encounters. The Matryoshka doll mechanic is an interesting one that makes the enemy harder the more you hit it. The lava golem shows this with how the large ones aren't that dangerous because of their single destructible fireball, but as you break it down to medium or small golems, then there are a lot more fireballs to dodge, making it more difficult to take no damage. Lava golems also pair nicely with the rest of Mental's horde, as their prediction fireballs may force the player to strafe into an incoming clear, or a biomechanoid's projectile from instinctively wanting to dodge that fireball. It's a way to pincer the player with a projectile, and the only one to do so, as the rest of the enemies shoot to where the player was and not where the player is going to be. Having a common or numerous enemy with the lava golem's prediction attacks could be leaning into unfair territory by making it hard to maneuver around, as the player is already pressured by so much already. Props to Crow Team for keeping this restraint. One last thing about the lava golems. The Natriska entry mentions that they are the base to all other elementals, which implies that there are variants of them. In the alpha, there were, but not anymore. We will instead see them repurposed in other campaigns in the series. With the gates to Thebes open, Sam can enter the Karnak district, which historically comprises many of the city's temples. The current objective given by Natriska is to find more information about the sign of Amun-Ra. Immediately, you can move backwards to find the Generous Yard secret and meet the Highlander Reptiloid and Lava Golem again. There's also a very nice view of the night sky, which features the Eagle Nebula and the Flame Nebula. Thank you to FrameRaider for this bit of trivia. Whether intentional or not, the nebulas are a very good allusion to Amun-Ra. The pillars of creation are found within the Eagle Nebula. Amun is considered as a creator god and also one of fertility and life. Ra is the god of the sun, and the Flame Nebula is an emission nebula that emits light from a star burning within. The Flame Nebula is a part of the Orion complex, which has a bunch of different space phenomena, just like how Ra seems to be associated with a bunch of different gods. Heading back in, we can see the long-lost beheaded and frogs. It's a nice relief to see a bit more variety, although this is the first encounter. The party doesn't start until the clear charge in. Admittedly, the amount of clear spam throughout this game feels like Stockholm Syndrome. The same goes for Crow Team's specialties of trapped health pills and armor shards. They're tiring after the joke gets old in the middle of the game, but in the late game they're so expected that now I feel content with them. Like if they were removed, then something would feel off or wrong. I can also look back at them and go, oh, I remember that. That was a pain to get through, and laugh it off like a World War I veteran reminiscing about the days of mustard gas. We're in luck too because the area with the pillar has multiple traps, one of which is 3 lava golems spawning on a cannonball pickup. One thing that bothers me about the lava golems spawning in is how they don't make any spawner noise like any other enemy. There's also the good old clear hiding around the corner. You may have noticed that I said that the cannonball pickup was trapped. And yes, the traps have evolved from minor pickups to supplies that would be nice to have. It keeps the player on their toes, but it's the same issue of making the item not worth picking up because of what spawns, such as the health vial that brings in bombers. Of course, you won't know that until you pick it up, but I guess that's part of the fun of Serious Sam. They're a bit easy to identify as they're usually in the corners or very suspicious spots. Plus, you should have plenty of experience by now to have a suspicion for them. Also, in typical Serious Sam fashion by now, there are fights everywhere. They pop in like jump scares in a cheap horror game at this point. I guess you could argue that Mental is getting more desperate and is increasing the intensity.
Just what the hell was that anyway?
I like how in the Shrine of Ramses III, the enemies hide from above instead of teleporting in. You can see +1 pickups arranged in patterns here, which is a remnant from the alpha build. Karnak originally being a part of that build, and being the demo for the game, may explain why we have a good amount of enemy variety. Another oddity is the second and final sleeping arachnoid section, or should I say prank section, because stealth is impossible due to the arachnoid sleeping over the key needed to progress. It's a very frantic fight that uses the enemy variety to achieve it. The arachnoids will chip away at your health, so they need to be dealt with quickly, but you have a Werbel and a couple of clear pressuring you. Then you have Invisible Gunnar that can tank the shots that you try to make or body block you for the Werbel and clear to close in. The frogs force you to keep moving if everything else wasn't enough, and to act as fodder. The same goes for the Rocketeers. It's chaotic even if there aren't that many enemies. You're given the first strike to get rid of the most dangerous enemy quickly. It's a fair and well-designed fight that I wish the first encounter did more of. If you happen to take a large amount of damage during that, or the surprise kamikaze wave right after, there is a very nice looking serious health greeting you right as you unlock the door. Of course, we all know it's a trap, but it's not as devious as they usually are. This one's a better designed version of the Valley of the King's cage trap, as the health is optional. It's mainly beheaded, Gunnar, and a few clear in the enclosed room. The clear are kept at a moderate amount, and so are the ones that charge in after the trap is over. It gives the player an actual fighting chance that relies on skill without getting screwed over like most of the other traps. Unfortunately, this balance doesn't last long. Exiting the Shrine of Ramses III, we're greeted with a statue of Thoth giving a nice glow in the night. The pool room to the left seems interesting at first, as it's highlighted by a flyby cutscene when you first enter. It gives a good look at the Theban Triad on the Shrine of Amun building. This is until you realize that you're going to have to walk all the way there and back. It's also pretty scummy with how it spawns enemies in. Going along the left side, the health vial is obviously a trap. However, it's unlikely that someone is going to survive that without knowing what's coming first, especially with clear and a major biomechanoid spawning behind the player. So it's a good idea to have your cannon out when walking in a wide space like this. This whole pool has spawns waiting to jump you with high damage dealing enemies. To help the player, the pool contains multiple secrets with a surplus of supplies that will bring you back to full if needed. This does beg the question of if the secrets in the first encounter are a necessity or not on serious difficulty. This most likely depends on the player. I would say no, but they are very nice to have to help ease the difficulty curve, or else there would be a lot more quick loading and trying to minimize the amount of mistakes made throughout a fight. It's mainly a challenge the player could do if they're already comfortable with the difficulty. I think Crow Team expected the player to find at least some of the secrets, especially with how they tease them at certain points and don't make them overly obtuse. Yet they still have to design the game to be possible without the secrets, even if it may be more difficult. On serious difficulty, the player probably isn't on their first playthrough and knows where some of the secrets are, but they will also have an idea of when and where enemies will spawn despite the extra spawns on serious. Once again, the answer is that it depends on the player. It's possible to not grab the secrets, but you'll just make it harder for yourself, so you better have the skill to back it up. For the average player, however, I would say that yeah, the secrets are a necessity to obtain if they're playing on serious. Inside the Shrine of Amun, Natriska reads a bunch of pictographs that were written in the same way as the ones found in the Abu Simbel Temple discovery. Instead of the writing being about technology and warning about mental like the ones in Abu Simbel, these ones tell of the history of the Sirians on Earth. It's stuff we already know since we've read the story on Crow Team's website and discussed it here. However, this is the most explanation that you're going to get purely within the game. It does imply that the Sirians faded out of history because of the revolt led by Memphis leaders, since the Sirians lived in Thebes. That fits with the story setup in Crow Team's website, but the ritual description to call the Sirian spaceship in the game implies that they lived in their spaceship and limited their contact with humans. We've been all over these discrepancies before, so we should probably just move on as they won't be resolved. There is a cool, reflective portal, no doubt to show off the engine, but cool nonetheless. I like how it has a 3D effect with the hieroglyphs going inward towards the portal's destination. Another show-off is the secret below the pool obelisk with a bending walkway and separated water pockets ending with an upside-down fall and Mental's eye drop. It's named that from an Old Man Murray interview, and no evidence has been found linking it to Mental besides its name. They probably just didn't know what else to name it. There's also another secret nearby where there's the Crow Team papyrus. It's oddly prophetic. It pokes fun, but it does mention Crow Team making poorly designed sequels until their biggest hit takes place in the complete opposite setting of Serious Sam. While it's true that Serious Sam has had divisive sequels, it's strange to think that Crow Team almost made a military shooter and a Doom reboot before pivoting to Serious Sam 3 to make this papyrus somewhat true in a very loose way. I still hope that Crow Team has the motivation to hone in on the uniqueness of Serious Sam to give it the proper hit that it deserves. Leaving the pool area, we get into a very nasty fight with a clear, forcing the player backward into more spawns. Needless to say, it's another fight in the pool area that is difficult to survive without knowing what spawns in and where. Like the waves and dunes, your best play is to get out of there so that you have room to breathe and only have one direction to deal with. After another quick fight, we can now enter the building, which has another multi-gravity secret room with another tier. They really wanted to show off the engine in this level, which makes sense given that it's the demo level. We also find that the room before is filled with supplies and is very nicely lit. It emanates a very calm before the storm type of feeling. Even Natriska is afraid. Entering the ominous courtyard, a single frog appears. I'm sure some of you watching know where this is going. It's all but confirmed as more and more frogs hop out, and eventually, the health bar appears. It's the Frog Room Part 2, although not as long. The same strategies work here as before. The next wave isn't as easy since the frogs evolve into kamikazes. This wave is a lot more frantic as you can't kite them around as you can with the frogs. It will require quickly blowing up kamikazes on your left before quickly switching to your right, and so on to keep them at bay. Luckily, this one isn't that long either, and there's some armor and health given afterwards, including some hidden armor if you blow up the middle Sphinxes. The next evolution is clear. While the weapon of choice would be the minigun or Tommy gun for the previous two waves, the laser gun will be the most useful for this one. These waves act like tests of how well you can manage a crowd under pressure. Any mistakes will follow into the next wave, and getting overwhelmed will mean death. It'll probably take a few tries because of this, so you'll have to get through by mastering it or getting lucky. That's it for this courtyard, but before we progress, we have to solve one of the only puzzles in the first encounter. It's a neat idea where we have to lure a werewolf to destroy a wall, and it would have been cool to see it used for finding some secrets. Yet with how finicky it can be, I can see why it wasn't used more. One more courtyard to go before this very long level is finished.
Let's rock and roll.
Everything is well, and we don't have to fight Clear and Kamikazes in the same wave for the nth time. The one thing that does bother me are the 2 adult arachnoids that spawn on top of the pillars. There is no cover besides this little corner on either side of the arena, or if you hug the wall that they're on. They appear again later on in the battle too. It's another thing that you would need to know ahead of time to be prepared for. Otherwise, it's a cheap spawn that will do a lot of damage if you happen to be in the middle of the arena, which you're encouraged to be at with the supplies appearing there. I do appreciate how this arena uses enemy combinations that we haven't seen before, or at least haven't been done to death that I've forgotten them by now. I also like how the later wave flows from one enemy to another. It starts with harpies, then Gunnar, then major biomechanoids, werebolves, and those adult arachnoids. It's a nice layering effect that changes who you'll need to focus on without completely overwhelming the player with the previous wave, while also increasing the intensity. The very last wave is pretty hard, even if the cannon makes short work of the werebolves and major biomechanoids. The issue is that there is so much noise that it's difficult to tell which direction the enemy is coming from, so you're likely to end up getting knocked out of the arena or blown to smithereens. Majors are no joke in how much damage they deal with those rockets. Karnak has very good enemy variety, nice hits of creative enemy encounters, but the overall level design leaves something to be desired. Currently, it feels like I'm just going room to fight enemies without much to look at or interact with in the environment. It has a lot of walking back and forth with the first temple and the Ankh pool. Like with most of the late game levels, it's very long and thus tiring to play, to where I feel like I've had my fill with only completing one mission a play session. One thing that needs to be said is that the clear were tastefully done in this level and weren't spammed to hell and back. Next up is Clear City. Entering Luxor gives a feeling of grandeur that you would expect from the city that housed the Sirians, although some of the later sections fall back on being more for gameplay than they are for the environment. It's also a neat touch that disrespecting the gods leads to enemies spawning in, such as the central statue of Thoth and the pillars of Sokar Osiris on the right side of the level. In addition to that, Luxor is a very unwelcoming place, as there is a clear snarl ever present in the statue yard, with no discernible location until the doors are finally unlocked. It's unintentional, but it shows a good potential use of sound. Crow Team did try to sneakily hide the spawner sound with the door opening sound effect. They also subvert expectations by not having the clear spawn right by the door, but behind a later pillar. It's wise to be on your guard around corners, especially in Luxor, as there are many clear lying in ambush. The Crow Team's specialties are back from their relatively tame appearances in Karnak. For example, the armor shard in the first left side yard has a pedestal moving like a race car with an adult arachnoid on top. Thankfully, they didn't make it a major biomechanoid instead. The clear one is up there at being cheeky though, with a kamikaze as the cherry on top. The wearable one also could have been a contender if it wasn't so big boned. And the health vial with a clear immediately spawning in and pouncing with very little time to react is just downright cruel. It is possible to dodge, but you would have to know of it ahead of time. The area where the clear trap is quite fitting, since that's where Luxor starts to feel like Clear City. Any amount of progression, such as each of the buttons that have to be pressed, spawn a bunch of clear. Kamikazes are placed to surprise you, where having an explosive weapon out and a primed trigger finger may mean instant death. As you can see me going from 45 armor and 122 health to being dead from a grenade plus a kamikaze. The slow weapon swap speed on Classic doesn't help either, so it's probably best to have the Tommy gun ready for this part. The central building reminds me of one of those games where you have to remember where each death occurs, like I Wanna Be the Guy. Instead, you have to remember where each spawn is, as this place is dense with surprises, one right after the other. Of course, most of them involve clear. With the golden heart collected, the next key item is the Feather of Truth, both of which are needed to open the locked door with Anubis on the front. Both keys are properly named after the weighing of the heart afterlife ritual, where only a heart that is not weighed down by sin can pass into the afterlife when balanced against the Feather of Truth, also called the Feather of Maat, the goddess of truth. Any hearts that were heavier were gobbled up by a Mit, a scary crocodile head, lion, and hippo monstrosity. I can see why the ancient Egyptians picked that combination, as those are some of the top animals that kill people. For serious Sam lore, maybe this is a metaphor for how the Sirians picked their Egyptian assistants. They would want trustworthy people to help translate and transcribe their technology time capsule. They would want them to keep secrets too, or else the time capsule could have been plundered prematurely. Therefore, this layer of secrecy could have created rumors within the populace, which eventually forms the ritual we know today. Just to further my point about Luxor being Clear City, you're met with a wave of clear when going across the statue courtyard after getting the golden heart. Also, the arachnoid, who's so far in the distance that it's basically a sniper, returns from Metropolis, and this time there are so many tall buildings that you'll need to play Where's Waldo to be able to find it. It doesn't help that the arachnoid blends in with the buildings as well. However, it did allow me to see a very nice detail of hearing the bullets hit the sand and seeing them make little poofs. It demonstrates how arachnoids may have hit scan attacks, but their accuracy diminishes the further they are. They do the same thing shortly after with reptiloids, but at least you can see a green fireball coming your way. If the other area didn't prove that clear are overused in this level, then this one will. Admittedly, it is suitable for clear with its narrow pathways and many corners that work to their advantage. It doesn't excuse the fact that this area features what feels like nothing but clear in a large quantity. After collecting the feather and back at the central statue courtyard, there is yet another clear wave. It's been done to death. I've been beating it past death, but it reflects the emotion given from Luxor. There are clearly too many used here, which is also not helped by how a lot of the earlier levels heavily relied on them as well. Inside of the structure does not provide any relief from the clear, as there are so many of them waiting to pounce. The first thing you encounter when the door opens are two clear waiting for you that create the ever-present snarl that I mentioned earlier. There's another one in the next room, and another a few seconds after that. This happens so frequently that I had to count it. Hopefully by now you see why this is Clear City. It is easy to complain about the excess of clear in this level, but what could Crow Team do to alleviate it? Well, for the area with the golden heart, some of the clear could be replaced with Gunnar, such as the trap spot with the minor biomechanoid. They achieve the same effect of keeping the player within the tight space for the biomechanoid to shoot from a slight elevation so it doesn't kill the Gunnar. It doesn't outright kill the player from how much damage clear do too. And for the golden heart, those clear are there to disrupt the player until the harpies can close the distance. Gunnar can do the same thing. For the opposite area that holds the feather, I would still recommend using the clear here, as I'm hard pressed to find a better enemy to put here. If anything, they could add bombers on top of those platforms. Instead, I would remove the clear waves that occur in the central statue courtyard after collecting the key items. I wouldn't replace them with anything to give the player a short break. If you really wanted to put something there, then frogs would work. I wouldn't use harpies as they were the main enemies when picking up either key item, and for all of the surprise around the corner clear, either remove or replace them with Gunnar. Although, replacing them might mean that the meme just transfers to whoever replaces the clear, and Luxor becomes Gunnar City or something else. I guess we can be grateful that they didn't choose kamikazes. For anyone that knows, I understand the irony that I'm suggesting to replace the clear with Gunnar, which serious difficulty does the opposite of throughout the game. Either way, there's still too much of a reliance on one enemy. Using a rotation of different enemies to fulfill a similar function, or removing some of the spam would be best. Before entering the obelisk room, the mummies here seem like an odd placement. Out of all of the tombs and mortuary temples, this is the only place where we have mummies. Maybe the Sirians were afraid of tomb raiders and wanted to have their dead friends close at hand. They could have been sitting here to be placed on the spaceship later, considering that the room to call it is within the next door, and in this world the Great Pyramid is by Thebes. This does imply that there might be space mummies out there somewhere if it is true. Considering the rest of the lore, I don't think that it is. Despite that the Natriska entries mention a ritual and the sign of Amun-Ra being the key, the obelisk protecting the radio antenna just emerges when Sam enters the room. The sign of Amun-Ra won't be used until the Great Pyramid too, making it a plot hole, or Natriska is unreliable in terms of details but somehow always fumbles into the correct solution. Natriska speculates that we've just called something from outer space, but she's unsure of what it was. Natriska also bets that whatever we called will be over the Great Pyramid. It's finally a good hypothesis from Natriska that she can back up with evidence. She claimed to have found information about this ritual and how the gods, or Sirians, would arrive at the Great Pyramid in the Luxor introductory message. At least we're no longer doing things based on speculation or just because. Otherwise, there isn't anything else special in this room besides a papyrus hinting at another secret level and a unique texture of Osiris with an Atef crown from the tomb of Sennajem. Crow Team uses Osiris a lot, giving me a suspicion that he's a very important Sirian. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm guessing that he could have been the expedition leader, hence why he's portrayed here and very extensively elsewhere. It also explains why he would be killed by another Sirian to usurp the throne given the Osiris myth. The room afterwards is loaded with supplies, the most we've seen so far. We know something is about to go down. The fight coming up features key hunting in a courtyard of pillars, an odd choice given Serious Sam's design philosophy. There are 4 to collect, however they don't spawn until you place the previous one on its pedestal. Unlike the other arena fights that have come before, this one does not spawn in more ammo besides a single green ammo pack. It's a nice change of pace where you'll need to ration out your ammo throughout the waves with some smaller spawns sprinkled in between. The supply room lacked substantial health and armor pickups, which you'll need to find scattered around the arena instead. This allows the focus of the difficulty to be on ammo management rather than minimizing damage taken, since health usually took precedence over ammo previously. The only other time I remember ammo being more valuable than health was Clear Alley, and I guess Alley of the Sphinxes if you want to count that too. The problem is that there aren't enough enemies to have managing ammo become a problem. Just don't keep using the same weapon and you'll be fine, which is an unfortunate missed opportunity. The waves follow a similar design of forcing the player out of cover so that ranged enemies can chip away at the player's health, but with different enemies to achieve that goal. This is best seen in the wave after picking up the second Ankh. It features only clear and arachnoids, and any remnants of the previous spawns if you didn't kill them. The pillars provide cover from the arachnoids, but the clear force the player out of that cover. It's a simple premise, but with how many arachnoids that can bunch up in one spot, it's dangerous to step out into the open even for a brief moment. With the clear rushing in, it's difficult to focus on thinning out the arachnoids, which leaves them free to harass. The first wave doesn't achieve this as effectively as the second due to it being a mixed bag of clear, kamikazes, and both biomechanoids and arachnoids, with no prominent quantity of any of them. The third Ankh wave utilizes werebles and reptiloids, with the next wave switching out the werebles for clear. None of these, including the fourth Ankh wave, match the difficulty of the clear and arachnoid fight as they don't exert the same pressure and punishment for moving out into the open. The fourth Ankh wave also abandons the design of the previous waves with just having minor and major biomechanoids who are easily taken out with the cannon. They could have had a wave of kamikazes and a few adult arachnoids or major biomechanoids, where the kamikazes provide too much pressure to be able to focus on the looming threat of the majors. The pillars would provide cover for at least some relief from the majors. Then kamikazes will eventually push the player out of that safe zone and into a barrage of rockets. This arena could have been better utilized to provide a more consistent difficulty rather than one spike and everything else being cleared with ease. Not to forget honing in on that rationing ammo idea that never came to fruition. Next up is the Great Pyramid, if you follow Nitriska's word, but we have a secret level to explore.